Innovating Education, Learning World in association with WISE, an initiative of Qatar Foundation.
The debate about the effect of uniforms on school discipline, individuality and social differences remains a hot topic among students, parents and teachers. We look at whether should uniforms be compulsory or whether they're past their sell-by dates. We report on two examples and hear an expert's point of view. In South Africa, where apartheid still casts a long shadow, many schools have a compulsory school uniform. They believe it helps eliminate class differences and encourages more discipline amongst students. We have a look at how it works in practice.
Uniforms are the rule in South Africa. They were adopted when the country was a British colony, and, as in several former British colonies, the tradition has remained. Young people were key players in the struggle to end apartheid. In the 1970s and 80s, schools were often hotbeds of political protest. Surrounded by this brutal violence, the principal of Pumulani Secondary School consciously chose his school's colours.
When the school was started, there was spillage of blood in Katlehong. Hence, you see the red colour on our uniform. But nevertheless, there was not doom at that stage. There was hope. Hence, the white colour represents hope to say, after some time, all this shall be over.
In South Africa, it's compulsory for students to wear uniforms at all public and most private schools. Many schools allow jewellery, while others maintain firm restrictions on hairstyles. These requirements are helping schools. Uniforms contribute to building a strong environment of learning. They help maintain discipline and create a sense of community within the school.
Nurses, they put on their uniform so that they can think like nurses. Doctors, they put on their uniform so that they can think like doctors. Same, the learners, they've got to put on their school uniform so that they can definitely think like learners.
In a country that was for so long governed by racial distinctions, class is now a strong dividing factor. Uniforms help to eliminate these class distinctions among students, levelling the playing field so that learning can be the primary focus.
From a better off or from a most impoverished family, they are all dressed in the same way. There's no need to feel ashamed.
Can you change the sentence? Labor won a competition?
Labor won a competition.
Yes.
She.
Okay, now, has he satisfied all the...
When you wake up in the morning, you know, Gute, I'm going to Pumulani. And when I enter that gate, I leave all the circumstances of my background or anything, and I enter with a mentality that I want to learn.
Students here enjoy the recognition that comes from wearing red and white. As they graduate and trade one uniform for another, they're aiming for a brighter future.
But not everyone agrees about uniforms. Aurora Velez talks to Andrea Precht, a doctor of education and an expert in social education, to get an overview on the advantages and disadvantages of dress codes in schools. She joins us now from Chile.
Andrea Precht, you're a specialist in school culture and someone who's extensively studied uniforms. Those in favour talk of making big savings. What do you think?
In
Chile, a family that dresses its children for school could easily spend half the minimum wage. That's a huge amount. So from that point of view, school uniforms are an additional thing to buy, and even an obstacle for the poorest families, because they don't have enough money to clothe their kids.
How did uniforms come about, and when did we start wearing them?
Uniforms have a long history, a history that comes from convents and the military. In a way, the school uniform is the little brother of the cassock and nun's habit. We want our schools today to teach us about diversity. But putting children in uniform takes us away from this principle, because we amalgamate uniform and sameness.
In countries like Australia and Malaysia, uniforms are equally used in state and private schools. In others, they're optional. So what does a map of the uniformed world look like?
I think it's interesting to make this distinction. Being a child and being young are not the same thing as being a student. In some institutions, being a pupil means respecting certain school rules, including wearing a uniform. It's interesting to see how young people deal with this uniformity, this violence that the school is subjecting them to. By personalizing their own uniforms, it's their way of introducing their own juvenile culture into the school.
Por el contrario, tenemos el fenómeno de Japón. Y aquí me gustaría hacer...
On the other hand, there's a phenomenon in Japan, and I'd like to point out two things. Firstly, its relationship with industry, the fashion industry notably, and secondly, the adult perception of uniforms. In Japan, it's one of the reasons school uniforms are fashionable. Youth has been eroticized. It's about making little Lolitas.
Serían pequeñas lolitas.
Andrea Precht, muchas gracias.
Bueno, muchas gracias a ti también, Aurora.
In Japan, school uniforms have become something of a fashion statement, with students customizing their outfits and adding personal accessories. So much so that they are increasingly being worn not only in schools when they are not compulsory, but also at some social activities.
Once a symbol of stiff school rules, traditional school uniforms today have become a liberating and popular fashion statement for many girls in Japan, thanks to the manga culture. Anime's fetishization of sailor uniforms has transformed their image. As a result, sailor-style outfits, blazers, stand-up collars and miniskirts are at the forefront of kawaii, or cool fashion for youngsters, not just in Japan, but also all over the world.
Our school isn't conventional, a bit different to the rest.
We can get out during the school break, and we don't have many rules on uniforms.
We're allowed to colour our hair, have manicures and put on makeup.
Even students who don't have to wear uniforms are keen on them as fashion, and a majority of them still love to wear uniforms when they get together to go shopping or gaming. Nevertheless, youngsters, often accompanied by their parents, are flooding to shops like Konami, where they can buy original items that are not part of any school's designated uniforms.
Uniforms allow us to show a unique beauty. It's something that foreigners love as well. The uniform is a magic garment, allowing everyone to look beautiful.
Japanese school uniforms elicit feelings of nostalgia among former students. Yes, they represent the school's image and society's aesthetic standard, but they also are often associated with a relatively carefree youth. Nobuyuki Mori, a uniform expert, has been studying their evolution for almost 30 years. Nowadays, it's difficult to differentiate uniforms between schools, but for high school students, it's more important to show that they're students, he says. The Japanese school uniform, originally imported from overseas, is now a century later being exported from Japan as a new trend that's building its own history day by day.
The feedback feedback from our social media pages reflects the disagreement on this subject, with some of our fans for and others against. Why don't you share your ideas with us? That's all we have time for. Goodbye for this week.
Learning World in association with WISE, an initiative of Qatar Foundation.